let's start with the big statement from the Chancellor. We heard Josh Simons, a new Labour MP who's part of the growth group, defending Rachel Reeves and blaming the Tories. Kat, how significant do you think this statement is this afternoon?
So I think this statement should be kind of seen as being effectively much like the sort of long attempts of the Tories to kind of use that left by Liam Byrne in the Treasury when they took office in 2010, saying there is no money left. This is Labour's version of that note, and they will be able to use it for everything, all of the difficult decisions that they have to take now, all of the things that people might not like, whether they be tax rises or spending cuts. And basically, this is the kind of ground zero point that they can blame the Tories for all of the challenges to come.
And that's right, isn't it, Theo? I mean, this is Rachel Reeves is going to say it's all about fixing the foundations of the economy, but it's also about framing the arguments, isn't it, for years ahead?
This has to land, make no mistake about it. Rachel Reeves has to be able to, as Kat says, it's a ground zero moment, build from this, that everything that Labour is going to do when it comes to that budget in the autumn and then going forward is necessary because of the mess and the state of the economy and the public finances that she has been bequeathed by the Conservatives. And if she doesn't, then if she doesn't land the statement, then there's going to be a huge amount of anger. And this is the risk for Rachel Reeves, that when it comes to announcing those tax rises, and they are going to be tax rises, she's not going to be prepared to borrow more money and compromise her reputation as being an iron chancellor. And when it comes to those tax rises, there's going to be a huge amount of anger if the groundwork hasn't been done so that the British public are prepared for the scale of the mess that Rachel Reeves says that needs to be sorted out and put back together again.
And we keep hearing, don't we, from Rachel Reeves, from Keir Starmer and other senior ministers, they're going to be honest with the public. I mean, Kat, obviously this afternoon we're not going to get figures, we're not going to get a spending review or a budget and the announcement of the tax cuts. But do you think Rachel Reeves does have to be a bit clearer and say, yes, look, I am going to have to put up taxes. We're going to get the OBR to look at the figures and I'm going to announce that in the budget and here's the date for it?
Well, I mean, it is convention that chancellors always sort of flap back those kind of questions and say that they're not talking about any kind of changes to taxation outside of a fiscal event. So I think she probably has a kind of a legitimate opportunity to sort of refuse those questions. But those questions are going to keep coming, as they did throughout the campaign, because, as Theo says just there, it's very clear the scale of the problem and her own sort of rules, self-imposed rules around borrowing and so on, means that there is really only one direction that this can go. And we know that they have already ruled out the 3 personal taxation rises on national insurance, income tax and VAT. So we know that there's only so much room for manoeuvre. And that means that people can ask specific questions about other areas like capital gains tax or other kind of wealth taxation. Those questions are going to keep coming on. We know that there is going to be a budget coming fairly soon. But until that point, Rachel Reeves is going to have to keep being asked these questions, as other Labour figures will be too.
We've just heard Stephen Swinford bringing us that news about the junior doctors' pay deal. Could be an overall rise of about 20% over 2 years. And we've already been hearing, haven't we, that the government does plan to give above inflation increases to other public sector workers. I mean, it does seem, doesn't it, as though, Theo, that she's making it even harder, isn't it? Because there's going to be even less money left for everything else.
Yes, and of course there are going to be many voters out there who supported Labour who are suddenly scratching their heads thinking, is this what I voted for? Public sector above inflation, public sector pay rises. And of course the junior doctors are going to be getting 20%. Of course, the effects of inflation, double-digit inflation under the Conservatives is what has underpinned the fact that so many public sector workers feel so much worse off, and therefore there are longer-term problems when it comes to recruitment and retention within our public services. But yes, there will be many voters who say, hang on a moment, I'm going to have to pay even more tax at a time when we have the highest tax burden in 70 years in order to pay for public sector workers seeing their salaries and wages uplifted beyond inflation. And that's going to be quite a difficult sell for many people who are already feeling the squeeze. Now, Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves have always made it clear that they're not going to be putting up taxes on people they define as working people, and I think the key part of Keir Starmer's definition was you can't write a check if you get yourselves in trouble. But we know from what's been speculated about, particularly around pensions, where the government is looking to put, in effect, equalise any benefit, any pensions relief benefit, so that those who pay the higher rate of tax or the top rate of tax will actually have to pay tax on their pensions. That actually, if you're earning above 50 grand a year, and for many people that isn't a huge amount of money, especially if you live in London and the South East, you are going to face tax rises.
And just briefly, if you could, Kat, also it's going to leave them open, isn't it, to the charge that, look, they're paying out this money to all those public sector workers because they want to keep the unions happy. And it does make it harder for everyone else.
I mean, I think that's certainly an argument. I think where I would slightly disagree with Theo is that actually I think that people probably recognise that there are different public sector workers and there are different groups of people that have gone on strike. You know, we were talking not so long ago about some of the sort of train workers and tube workers going on strike, and they have seen their pay rise over a period where junior doctors haven't. And I think people can sort of distinguish between the two groups, and people perhaps would prefer that those involved in such professions, nursing, doctors and so on, do see a sort of pay restitution, which is what the junior doctors have been asking for. Of course, it sounds like a big number, and it is a big number, and it's going to cost around £1 billion. But there is an argument that says that actually, you know, it's sort of fixing the house while the sun shines. And of course, we've also got this fresh out of the hopeful breakthrough on junior doctors, which is, of course, added to the sort of issues around the waiting lists for the NHS. We now also have this possible action being taken by GPs, which will also be quite expensive to resolve. But if we think about some of the issues that were really coming to the fore during the election campaign, people recognise that fixing the NHS is probably one of, if not the most important areas. And therefore, I think there is probably a bit more sympathy towards spending more money in these areas than there might be for other parts of the country.